Wander onto the Barbican estate in the City of London, and you might think you've wandered into a parallel universe. Unless you've been there, it's impossible to appreciate just how radically different it is from everything around it. The architecture is angular, alien, and brutalist. Soaring, elevated walkways stretch between concrete buildings. The whole thing is like a weird, beautiful fortress that's been dropped whole and complete into central London, and simply absorbed into the crazy mess that is one of the greatest cities in the world. But the Barbican wasn't dropped here by an alien civilization. It was built, and ever since it was built, it has been painstakingly maintained in such a way that it has remained utterly unique and utterly different from anything around it. So much so that what was originally intended as a residential housing estate has become a tourist attraction that people from all over the world come to visit. Let's start at the beginning. The Barbican estate was conceived and built after World War II. No spoilers here, but the war was a pretty bad time. Once it wrapped up, huge swathes of London were in ruins, and most of the people who would normally have fixed that were dead. The site where the Barbican now stands was particularly badly devastated. Less than 50 people still lived there, and hardly any undamaged buildings remained in situ. As such, the decision was made on the 19th of September 1957 to build a bunch of new houses there. Part of the post-war plan was for people to start having babies. Lots of babies. And for that to happen, lots of new housing was needed. Architects Chamberlain, Powell and Bond, who had already worked on the nearby Golden Lane estate, were selected. They were young, fresh-faced and full of ambitious ideas. And this basically entirely empty plot right in the middle of London was a gift they weren't going to pass up. They put together a design that, for the time, was incredibly futuristic and ambitious. A few of the key features. Most everything on the estate is made of concrete, just like a lot of buildings after the war. Again, basically everyone was dead, so there wasn't enough skilled labour to go around, and building materials were thin on the ground. The easy-to-use set-it-and-forget-it nature of concrete, plus the cheap price tag, meant that it was a first choice as a building material in the post-war years. Well, actually, in this case, it was second choice. The architects wanted the estate to appeal to up-and-coming middle-class types, and so planned to clad the whole thing in oh-so-very tasteful white marble. Something that would have made these soaring apartment blocks look kind of like a cruise ship. However, given that they didn't so much exceed their budget as forget they had a budget in the first place, the City of London Corporation, who were footing the bill for the new estate, told them no. So, instead, the Barbican is bare concrete, like a great many other brutalist structures built around the same time. Look close enough though, and you'll see that this concrete has been lovingly textured by hand. A painstaking inch-by-inch job that took years to complete and totally wrecked the bodies of the men who were hired to do it, but was still cheaper than the white marble. Another notable feature of the estate, it is rife with crenellations. That's these toothy things, which look a bit like they belong on a castle rather than a housing estate. Indeed, on a castle, these would be used to shield defenders from a besieging army. But they clearly don't need to do that here, so why does the whole place look so thoroughly defensive? Well, on the one hand, that was just what was in at the time. The world was recovering from a devastating war, and as a result, there was a general tendency to design things that looked like bunkers rather than bedsits. But in this case, there was also another reason. The site where the Barbican stands was once occupied by a Roman fort. You can actually see some evidence of this within the estate. The original fort was incorporated into a later set of walls that eventually came to encircle and protect London, some traces of which can still be found around the city today. Anyhow, the Latin word for this type of fort was barbicana, meaning fortified watchtower or gateway. That's where the estate gets its name, and that's the deal with all the battlements. They're a reference to the site's incredibly long history. Then there's another feature that you can't possibly miss when visiting the Barbican. I say you can't miss it because if it's your first visit, you'll almost certainly get lost while using this feature. I'm talking about the elevated walkways or pedways. When navigating the estate, you can, in places, get around at ground level, but elsewhere you'll find yourself wandering along elevated streets that connect buildings directly to one another. Pedways were an idea that was popular at the time the Barbican was built, but never really took off. The plan was that noisy, polluting cars would motor around at ground level, while pedestrians would saunter along streets in the sky, elevated above the hustle and bustle. It was believed that pedways would be everywhere in London before too long, so the architects of the Barbican made sure to include them so that their brand new estate could plug right into the pedway revolution. Of course, you know by now that the revolution never came. Pedways sort of worked when they were designed in, but retrofitting them into the rest of messy old London proved impossible. Plus, they were a great place to get lost, mugged, or generally inconvenienced in. So the Barbican stands alone with its maze of elevated walkways. And perhaps that's a good thing, because navigating them is an absolute nightmare if you're not familiar with the place. It's a veritable maze, and somehow you always seem to end up on the wrong level, able to see where you want to go, but unsure how to get there. Thank goodness the rest of London isn't like that, hey? Confusing as it is, though, the Barbican is a place that a lot of people call home. In the beginning, the estate was designed as an upmarket option, the purview of the middle and upper middle classes. Flats were rented out by the City of London Corporation. In the 1980s, though, residents were given the right to buy their homes, and now most of them are privately owned. But the Barbican is more than just a housing estate. On site, you'll find a range of public institutions, including a library, a school for girls, and an arts centre. The Barbican is a living, breathing, vital part of the city, which is crazy considering just how different it is from all of the city that surrounds it. It must be an incredible amount of work to maintain the Barbican's unusual structures, to make things work in this bizarre, complex concrete jungle. But people love the Barbican, and they're not about to let it fall into ruin just because it's incredibly quirky. And that's one thing that really stands out about the Barbican. Whereas a lot of other complex, pedway-infused concrete megastructure estates that were built around this time, looking at you, the Cumbernauld Centre, haven't stood the test of time, the Barbican truly has. And it's not because it was better designed than its field contemporaries, but because people, thousands of individual hard-working people, decided that they liked it enough to put in the time and money and heartache to make this crazy, crooked, confusing experiment work, and keep on working. Oh hey! I hope you enjoyed this little tour through the history of the Barbican as much as I enjoyed making it. If you did, a like and a subscribe would mean the world. It's free and it brings me one step closer to my ultimate goal, taking over the world. Bye!